So I tried to crochet Snoopy, the dog from the Charlie Brown show or the Peanut show, and you wouldn't believe the results that I got. If you guys don't know, I'm trying to learn how to crochet, and I'm breaking down the true cost of learning the hobby, the material cost as well as the time it takes to learn. And if you haven't followed along as far as my journey, the last thing I crocheted was a granny square, and it actually turned out to be a granny square. As well as I'm showing you guys the cost of me learning, such as what type of resources I've been using to help improve my skills. If you don't know, I also have a website called RDU is Fun where you can find fun activities to do in the Raleigh-Durham area. But that doesn't just limit to just crochet classes, but you can also find quilting classes as well as fabric classes that can help you sew. But going back to the idea of crochet, how can I use these skills to help me improve when it comes to a new style of crochet, which is origami? This is a style that was adopted from the Japanese, and I'm going to try to use this skill when it comes to crocheting. What I did was create a slip knot. I was able to control how big or small I wanted the hole by controlling the strand that was loose at the bottom. Then I followed along with the video and crocheted 5 chains up. Then I made my first mistake. See, I crocheted in the same hole where a yarn is, instead of doing what was right on the top video where I should have crocheted in the second hole or the second chain where my yarn was from. This is important because as I try to crochet at the bottom video, it seems like the crochet is undoing itself, like I'm not moving forward. But at the top video, you can see I corrected my mistake, and you can see I was actually moving forward and making more loops. So if you feel like you're in a crochet stump or a crochet fog of why you're not even moving forward, it could be because you're crocheting in the same area where your yarn is threaded. And another crochet terminology I wasn't familiar with was crocheting in the same place. See, when I heard this, I thought it meant crocheting in the same spot, which actually made me frozen when it came to my crocheting because I didn't know how I could crochet in the same spot, when actuality you take your crochet hook and you open up your original hole and you take some of that yarn and you go back into that hole and take that one single strand to make 2 loops again. And then once you have done that, you go through those loops and you create your second row, which is the row that you just created, and then you have your original hole, which is at the bottom. You take that yarn and you go back into that original hole. This is very helpful because it made me realize that crocheting in the same place just means going back to the original hole that you created. After creating my 3 chains up, that's when I decided to look at the holes again on the side, because at this next step they wanted us to create a 4th row by going into the last hole that we created. Now at this point, after watching my last mistakes, I knew that I wanted to crochet up, and even if I had to crochet in the same hole, doesn't mean it's the same section. It meant by going to the original hole. So I decided to go to the hole on the side because that was the hole that I originally started with to help grow my crochet. While doing this, I also made sure that I was watching the video. It's completely normal when you're learning to re-watch the same fragment of the video like multiple times. Like I had to rerun that thing over and over again just to make sure I was aligning myself in the right areas of where I should crochet, as well as watching the hand movements of the person who was doing this video to make sure I was also following along the same steps. And it's also completely normal to be so stumped that you might have to take an hour or even have to take a break. It took me several days and a little bit of time to recollect myself and figure out what I needed to do so that way I have something that looks or resembles close to what was crocheted in the video. I continued and made my second row of crochet. In this point, I decided to take my crochet hook and follow along with the video and make sure I was going onto the first hole. But this time it's tricky because how do you know where is the first hole when you created a new row? Well, I tried to go near the edge. You can test to see if you're near the edge by putting your crochet flat on the table, and when you do this, you want to make sure that you see your hook not going directly on top of a hole but going near the edge. This allows you to go into the real first hole and be able to crochet a little bit further along to grow that length of the crochet. As well as when I was doing this, I was watching the video and they also wanted to make sure that we grab 2 strings. The string on the back that was a little bit loose and the string that I currently have to crochet. And I think they did this so that we can tighten up and kind of finish off that edge and finish off that loop or section. When I was doing that, it was kind of hard because when you're crocheting, especially when you're bringing 2 strings, you have to really open up the hole so that we can get through those loops. And I definitely tried to do that by taking my fingers and opening it up. It doesn't look as graceful as what the person was doing in their video, but again, I'm here to show you guys the real life working of trying to do different crochet, especially doing crochet techniques that you're not really familiar with or you're just trying to learn. Once I was able to get through that loop, I was able to continue on. There was a hole in the middle, in the center, that was sort of like a micro mistake. I didn't mean to make it so big, but it was kind of like a guiding force of what holes I should avoid, because they were trying to show us in the video of how to grow the crochet, and at the top around the edge, I was still deciding whether or not I should go on the hole on the top, where it's just like a hole that you see, or the hole underneath that was closer to the edge. I decided to go to the hole that was more underneath, that was closer to the edge, because I was again basing it on the motions I was seeing in the video, as well as trying to figure out if I wanted to grow the edge of the crochet to make it bigger. It was probably better if I started from at least underneath instead of right on top. So that's what I did. So I went to did some single crochets, and of course I took the hook, took some yarn from the back, and made sure I opened up those holes, because again in the video they were much more sleeker putting it inside each loop, where I was still learning, so you guys can still see me using my fingers. But then after that, I was able to continue crocheting my single crochets around the edge. And you can, if you didn't know, if you haven't watched my previous video, I had some issues when it came to curving. But the great thing is, with this video, curving was what was needed to help grow the crochet and kind of create the little baby foot that you see when it comes to creating the Snoopy or the Snoopy dog crochet for the keychain I was creating. And I was continuing to grow the crochet. You can see I was getting a little bit better with each movement, because it was kind of like the same pattern of opening up the loops, taking some yarn in, taking it out, and making sure that everything was looking aligned and even. Even though it wasn't perfect, slowly and steadily I was making progress. This little ball of white yarn was slowly turning into a little mini bowl, and it was pretty cool to see the progress of how each row I was creating was starting to be more formed and structured. Before, I was kind of doubtful whether or not my yarn was capable of creating this very formed, structured shape that you would get with little dogs or toys, but the yarn that I used was acrylic yarn. Now, I'm not sure about other different types of yarn, but this yarn that I had is actually pretty accessible, and a lot of yarns are very much the same type, not the exact same type of material, but this is a very easily accessible yarn that you can probably get from a general store, or you can get at a local craft store, so that I wouldn't be worried about not having access or not being able to get the same exact yarn. But with the materials that I had, the yarn that I had, I got from a craft store, and the cost I got, because I got a coupon with it, was around $1.71. So it was pretty good deal, at least in my perspective, when it came to getting this ball of yarn. And the other color, which was black, that I needed for Snoopy, you won't be seeing here yet, but the white yarn was just enough to create what I needed for the smaller version of Snoopy. And as I continue on with the progress, how long did it actually take for me to actually get this part done? Now, I split it into 2 days, not by purpose, but in the first day was Monday, and I only had like an hour to work on this progress. And that hour was really just dedicated to making sure I got the rows right and crocheting. And then the next day, which was Tuesday, I spent around 3 hours working on this, because again, like, I was trying to move forward and making sure everything was tight and clean as far as my rows. So that just took a very long time, as well as just replaying. It was so natural for me to just replay to make sure that I was following the steps, and also seeing the hand movements, because sometimes people be crocheting really fast in moments you really want them to slow down and actually show their progress. So that was also another reason why it took so long. So in total, for this small segment of Snoopy, it took around 4 to 5 hours. Now, if you haven't watched my other videos, this is probably a normal progression when it comes to me in particular, when it comes to doing different steps or crocheting different items. See, I was still getting a little bit more structure, but I do have to say, out of this video, that I was trying to complete the foot and also a little bit of the leg, but unfortunately, because of timing, I was only able to get a little bit of the foot and maybe some of the ankle, but not as much as I would initially had in mind when it came to crocheting and getting this done. So I guess in part of the progress of Snoopy's body, I probably got maybe 5 to 10% done. So I still have way more elements and pieces to put together and also crochet to complete Snoopy's body, or at least for the crochet part. But I also want to show you guys that this is also a normal thing. yes, it's normal for people to not have crochet projects finished within a week or maybe even within a month. But I wanted to show you the breakdown of what it was like for me starting this project, especially as a person who is just used to crocheting chains and maybe patches. So if you guys want to continue seeing more of these type of videos and this series, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, like, comment down below if you guys have crocheted this type of style before with a different animal or creature. Like maybe you haven't made Snoopy, but maybe you made a dog, or maybe you haven't made a dog, maybe